Hey, Bubba.
That's a guinea.
This is a chicken.
Well, there you have it. Audio that appears to show Alex Murdaugh was at or near the vicinity of the kennels at 8:44 p.m., according to Paul Murdaugh's phone, which he shot this video on. That destroys or at least undercuts Alex Murdaugh's alibi that he was back at the house while Maggie and Paul were at the kennels and was allegedly never down in that part of the property. So that's a major moment in the state. Does it undercut his alibi? Does it destroy his case? We'll talk about it. All right, Patrick. A lot happened yesterday in the Murdaugh trial. A long day of testimony, lots of things to unpack here. Most importantly, the video with the audio that apparently shows Alex Murdaugh's voice in the vicinity of the kennels where Paul obviously is, because he's in with the dogs in the kennel. You can clearly hear Paul. You can clearly hear Maggie. You can apparently hear Alex, and it's 8:44 p.m. And we know that the murders happened sometime between that minute and 9:06 or 9:07 p.m. based on the state's theory and what some of the other evidence tends to show. So big problem here for Alex Murdaugh is this undercuts what he was telling investigators from the beginning and time and again, that he never was down at the kennels that evening, at least close to the time of these murders. And this puts him there within minutes of these brutal murders occurring. What's your takeaway?
This evidence is also, in some ways, a problem for the state. They took a lot of data from Paul's cell phone, from Maggie's cell phone, and from Alex's cell phone. And when you take that puzzle and separate all the times and try to figure out, try to paint a picture with what that data tells us, I think it's a little confusing for a lot of people, and because it kind of paints a picture that several things could be going on. But the fact that Alex is at the kennels, I think it's almost accepted that he was there just a few minutes before what is being presented as these murders taking place. During their case yesterday, they presented the cell phone evidence of Maggie and Alex regarding deleted phone calls. So that was a big deal. So they showed that Maggie missed 5 phone calls from Alex on the night of the murder. Those happened at 9:04, 9:06, another one at 9:06, 9:45, and 10:03 that night. So all those were from Alex's phone. The data on Alex's phone also shows that he placed an outgoing unanswered FaceTime call on June 4th, 3 days before the murder at 3:31, and then another unanswered FaceTime call at 4:35. And so when they were looking at the data, though, on Alex's phone, there was a gap until he made a phone call to Maggie at 10:25. So those 5 phone calls at 9:04, 9:06, 9:06, 9:45, and 10:03 were all deleted from Alex's phone. Now, the interesting thing is they didn't pull that data until September 21st. They didn't really investigate the one person at the scene until months later.
So again, we have this problem is that a lot of the state's theory that's now they're using to try to prosecute him for murder was apparently not their theory until September, when there was plenty of time for all of this evidence to have been lost, etc. And I think the defense is going to raise the point, hey, y'all want to use this as incriminating evidence that he deleted these text messages, but you don't know when they were deleted. And he handed his phone right over to them. He unlocked his phone for the investigators that night. When they recovered Maggie's phone, he unlocked it for them. He gave all of this evidence to the investigators. What happened over the next 2 months? I mean, lots of things could have happened. Were they deleted the night of the murders, or were they deleted sometime after, between June 7th and September?
And I don't think anybody's ever going to know the answer to that question.
So another takeaway from yesterday's trial that anybody who watched it, when I've discussed it with people, the first thing people say is, man, it's crazy how much of your activity is being recorded by your phone. Your phone knows everything about you at all times. Talk a little bit about that. What kind of things did we learn?
You know that if you're on FaceTime, you know that it's listening to you if it's running in the background, because you'll be having a conversation with your wife about cars driving down the street, and the next thing you know, you're getting... The next time you open Facebook, you see ads for the cars you were just talking about. So, I mean, we know that that's going on, but the detail that's coming out in this case is, so it's a little, it's really interesting. They know everything we do, all the way down to the second. Even when the phone is in lock mode, it's recorded what time it went into lock mode. If it's in lock mode and you're walking around, it's recording your steps. It records a change in orientation, and all of those things come into play in the evidence that was presented yesterday. So if we look at the activity on Paul's phone that they presented yesterday, his last activity, well, let's start with that video. That video was recorded at 8:44 and 49 seconds to 8:45 and 47 seconds p.m. So it's down to the second. And that's when he recorded that video that was never sent to his friend about the dog's tail. He received a text at 8:48 that he read, or that somebody read, and 8:48 that someone who read. And remember, so that's 8:45. We know that Alex was there. He received two texts at 8:48. At 8:49, he received another text that was never read. So that's 5 minutes later. So the state, I think, is trying to present the case that that's around that time is when Paul was murdered. Maggie's phone recorded 59 steps at 8:53, and then there was no activity on her phone again until, I believe you said 9:07.
Yeah, and the thing about it that's really crazy about trying to piece this puzzle together by using cell phone data is that it gives you a really incomplete picture. So as much as it's helpful for the state that it places Alex there at the time of the murders, because we have this audio that's date stamped 8:44 p.m., it poses problems for the state because we have Alex's phone showing something completely different than what Maggie's phone was showing at the same time. Maggie's phone, which we know was eventually recovered well off the side of a road as if it had been thrown from a car, its last activity was at 9:07 p.m. And just before it locks forever, it shows a change in orientation. So her phone's activity is inconsistent with Alex's phone activity at the time, which really undercuts the state's theory that Alex took the phone from the scene, got in his car, drove away, threw the phone. Problem with that is, at the time that this would have happened, Alex is walking, he's not in a car. I'm curious how important this is going to be in closing argument, because the state is making a lot of it. And in opening, the state put a huge emphasis on this, in that once they discovered some of these videos and that there was inconsistencies in Alex Murdaugh's story, this is what led them to go ahead and pursue charges. The problem is that it's still very circumstantial evidence. In this trial, we don't have a witness. We don't have a murder weapon. We don't have the victim's DNA being found, at least at the time of at the crime scene, on the alleged murderer. There's so many pieces missing that you typically need to get a conviction. It's going to be really interesting to see if this cell phone data is ultimately enough to secure a conviction for the state. But is also, I think the defense is going to be able to use it just as effectively to undercut the state's theory.
When you think about the fact that Alex is walking around, he's taking 283 steps, and I believe that happened at 9:02 is when he started taking 283 steps. That's a lot of steps. It's not enough steps to get from the dog kennels to the house. That's about 500 yards, and by regular calculation, I mean, everybody's gait is different, but a normal gait is going to be about 600 steps is what I found. And so that's not anywhere near 283. So he wasn't traveling to or from the kennels, and we know he got in his car. It's interesting. When Paul's phone didn't receive another text or didn't respond to that text at 8:49, his phone had 2% charge at the time, and it didn't fully drain until 10:34 that night. So we know that Paul's phone was basically sitting there doing nothing. Otherwise, it would have drained under normal use within about 10 to 15 minutes after that. So we know that.
No, that's interesting. I had not heard that fact. That's really fascinating.
The other thing that I think is pretty important is that the officer, when he was pressed in cross-examination about what this evidence showed, he conceded that this evidence would show that Alex's phone and Maggie's phone were not together when Alex was walking around.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of see how both sides are going to use this in closing argument. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But you can already see that the defense is going to use this to support their theory that somebody else came onto the property while Alex had gone to go see his mother, whether he left at 8:45 or if he left earlier, as he had previously said. But at some time after 8:44 p.m., he left and went to his mother's and was not at the scene when this happened. Somebody else came to the scene, drove up to those kennels, which are far away from the house, and they murdered these two people, and then took Maggie's cell phone with them, drove away, and about a mile down the road got a call, because there's a call at 9:06. The phone is showing a change of orientation, which they're going to say is it being thrown from the car, and then it locks forever and is discovered eventually on the side of a road fairly far away, about the distance you could throw a cell phone. And that's going to be used to support their theory that somebody else came on the property and did this and then took the phone away, and that there was evidence of this the entire time. The tire tracks, that there were other vehicles that didn't belong to Alex or the family that were fresh tire tracks that night, possibly even some footprints that were never collected, that there seemed to be evidence of from crime scene photos. You can just kind of see how both sides are going to use this to try to support their case. And again, it's going to be interesting. You know, it supports both. And as we keep reminding people, it's the state that has the burden of proof. The state is the one who has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. All the defense has to do is point to doubt. And the cell phone stuff with Maggie's phone, to me, definitely sows some doubt in my mind that this happened the way the state is saying it happened, which is they have to prove that Alex murdered these people, not that he was there while somebody murdered them, which also I think is kind of indicative from some of this evidence. That's a very high probability, I think. But they have to show that he turned on these folks and blew them away and then drove away.
It was an interesting day of testimony yesterday. We'll see what happens today. I think today they're going to be getting into the financial crimes that Alex Murdaugh was engaged in. I think that their theory there is that as the walls came caving in, he needed that was his motive for killing his wife and son in the most brutal fashion I think you could possibly do.
Yeah. Again, we'll see how this plays out, but that was what they explained in opening, is that their theory is that he was covering up white-collar crimes by committing capital murder against the two people he apparently loved the most, which I think is a dubious argument. We'll see how it plays with the jury, but so far, lots of interesting things happening every day in this trial. We're going to continue to cover this on a daily basis. We're right outside of Walterboro, an hour away. We are been watching it. Make sure you subscribe so that you get updates whenever we drop our videos, and we'll continue adding our perspective on this.